The ink stains on her fingers were as permanent as the words she set into metal. But Kathleen Turner had never imagined that a cowboy would walk through her father's print shop door and change everything she thought she knew about permanence. It was July 1878 in Eagar, Arizona Territory, and the afternoon heat made the metal type almost too hot to handle. Kathleen stood at the composing table, her dark hair tied back with a practical ribbon. Her sleeves rolled up despite the impropriety her mother would have scolded her for if she were still alive. The newspaper had to go to press by evening, and her father, Thomas Turner, was down with a summer fever that left the entire operation in her capable hands. She heard the door open, but did not look up immediately. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, plucking letters from the typecase and arranging them backward in the composing stick. Each piece had to sit perfectly flush. Each word had to be spaced just right. One mistake could ruin an entire line, an entire page, an entire edition. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was deep and carried the dust of long trails. Kathleen finished setting the word territorial before she looked up, and when she did, she found herself staring into the greenest eyes she had ever seen. They belonged to a man who stood at least 6 feet tall, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He held his hat in his hands, a respectful gesture that immediately set him apart from most of the rough men who wandered through town. "Can I help you?" Kathleen asked, setting down her composing stick with care. "I need to place an advertisement," he said. "I am looking for ranch hands, good pay for honest work." Kathleen reached for the ledger where they tracked paid notices. "Your name, sir?" "Russell Reynolds." "I have the ranch about 8 miles north of town. Bought it 3 months back from the Patterson family." She wrote his name in careful script. "And what would you like the advertisement to say?" He stepped closer to the counter, and she caught the scent of leather and sage. "Wanted. 3 experienced ranch hands for cattle operation. Must be willing to work hard. Fair wages, room and board provided. Apply at the Reynolds Ranch north of Eagar." Kathleen wrote it all down, then calculated the cost based on the number of words. "That will be $2 for 1 week in the paper. $4 for 2 weeks. Make it 2 weeks, he said, reaching into his pocket for the coins. As he counted out the money, his eyes drifted to the composing table where she had been working. "You set type?" "I do," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. "My father taught me when I was 12. He has been feeling poorly, so I am managing the paper until he recovers." Russell Reynolds moved around the counter without invitation, drawn to the cases of metal type like a scholar to rare books. Kathleen should have told him to stay on the customer side, but something about his genuine interest stopped her. "I have never seen it done up close," he admitted. "How do you keep all the letters straight?" She joined him at the table. "Each case is organized the same way. The letters used most often are closest to hand. ETAO, the less common ones are further away. You have to think backwards, set everything in mirror image." He studied the composing stick she had been filling. "That takes real precision." "It does," she agreed. "One letter out of place, one space too many or too few, and the whole thing falls apart. You have to be careful, deliberate." Russell looked at her then, really looked at her, and Kathleen felt something shift in her chest. His gaze was not the leering stare she sometimes endured from cowboys who had been too long on the range. It was thoughtful, measuring, as if he were trying to understand something important. "Set your life beside mine with that precision," he said suddenly, and then seemed startled by his own words. "I apologize, miss. That was forward of me." Kathleen felt heat rise in her cheeks, and it had nothing to do with the July temperature. "That was quite forward, Mr. Reynolds. I meant no disrespect." He took a step back. It is just that watching you work, seeing that level of care and attention, it reminded me of something my father used to say. He said the key to a good life was finding someone who treated the important things with precision. Not coldness, not distance, but real careful attention to what matters. That is a wise observation, Kathleen said carefully. She should have been offended, should have shown him the door, but instead she found herself curious. What brought you to Eager, Mr. Reynolds? Looking for a fresh start, he said. I worked cattle in Texas for 10 years, saved every penny I could. When the Patterson Ranch came up for sale, I saw my chance. It is not a big operation, but it is mine, or it will be once I finish paying the bank. That is admirable, Kathleen said. Most men who come through here are just drifting. I drifted long enough, Russell said. 25 years old, and I figured it was time to put down roots, build something that lasts. Kathleen was 22 herself, and she understood that feeling more than he knew. Since her mother's death 3 years ago, she had been helping her father run the newspaper, learning every aspect of the business. But she also felt the weight of time passing, of opportunities that might slip away while she stood at this composing table, setting other people's words into metal. Your advertisement will run starting Friday, she said, returning to the safety of business. The paper comes out every Friday morning. I appreciate it. Russell put his hat back on. Would it be all right if I checked back later in the week, in case anyone has inquired about the position? That would be fine, Kathleen said, and she tried to ignore how much she hoped he would come back. He did come back 3 days later on a Wednesday afternoon when the shop was quiet. Kathleen was proofreading the galleys for Friday's edition, checking each line for errors. Her father was up and about again, but still weak, and she had insisted he rest while she handled the final preparations. Miss Turner, Russell said when he entered, I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all, she said, though her heart had started beating faster the moment she heard the door. I was just checking our work before we print. Has anyone come by about the advertisement? Not yet, she admitted, but it does not print until Friday. Word will get around once people see it. He looked disappointed but nodded. I suppose I am impatient. I have 100 head of cattle and only one hired man at present. The work is more than the two of us can handle properly. You work the ranch yourself? Kathleen asked. Every day, he said. I am not the kind of owner who sits in a big house while others do the labor. I am out there with my hands in the dirt, fixing fences and chasing strays. Kathleen set down her galley sheets. Would you like some water? You look like you have been riding hard. I would appreciate that, Russell said. She went to the back room where they kept a pitcher and glasses. When she returned, she found him studying the printing press itself, that same fascinated expression on his face. It is a Washington hand press, she explained, handing him the water. Built in 1865. My father bought it from a newspaper in Santa Fe when they upgraded to a steam press. And you know how to operate it? I can do everything except the heavy lifting, she said. Inking the form, positioning the paper, working the lever. My father still helps with that part. It takes considerable strength. Russell drank the water slowly, considering. I would like to see it work sometime, if that would not be an imposition. We will be printing Friday morning, Kathleen heard herself say. You could come by around 8 if you are truly interested. I will be here, he promised, and he was. Friday morning at 8 o'clock exactly, Russell Reynolds walked through the door just as Kathleen and her father were preparing the press. Thomas Turner looked better than he had all week, though still thinner than Kathleen liked. Papa, this is Mr. Reynolds, Kathleen said. He placed the advertisement for ranch hands. I told him he could watch the printing process if that is all right with you. Thomas was a shrewd man who had run a newspaper for 20 years. He looked at Russell, then at his daughter, and Kathleen saw the calculation in his eyes. But all he said was, "Happy to have an interested observer. Kathleen, why don't you explain what we are doing?" So she did. She showed Russell how they locked the type into the form, how they inked the raised letters, how they positioned the paper just so. Thomas worked the heavy lever that brought the platen down, creating the pressure that transferred ink to paper. Then they lifted it, carefully removed the printed sheet, and began again. "We will run 200 copies," Kathleen explained. "That is our circulation. It will take us about 3 hours. "Can I help?" Russell asked. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You want to work a printing press?" "I want to be useful," Russell said simply. "And I would like to understand how it is done." So they put him to work removing the printed sheets and stacking them carefully to dry. It was not complicated labor, but it required attention. A smudged sheet or a sheet placed carelessly could ruin the work. Russell approached it with the same focus Kathleen had seen him give to everything else. They worked together through the morning, and Kathleen found herself acutely aware of his presence. When he stood close to take a sheet from her hands, she felt the warmth of him. When he asked questions about the process, she heard the genuine interest in his voice. When he smiled at her across the press, she felt something bloom in her chest that was both terrifying and wonderful. By noon, they had finished the run, and the sheets were drying on racks. Thomas announced he was going to the hotel for lunch and to distribute papers to the restaurants and saloons. It was clearly a convenient excuse to leave them alone, and Kathleen felt embarrassed and grateful in equal measure. "Thank you for letting me help," Russell said once her father had gone. "That was fascinating." "Thank you for being willing," Kathleen replied. "Most people think printing is boring." "Most people are fools," Russell said. "This is how information spreads, how communities stay informed. It is important work." They stood in the shop, surrounded by the smell of ink and paper, and Kathleen felt the moment stretch between them. Finally, Russell spoke. "Miss Turner, I know we have only just met, but I would like to call on you properly, if you would allow it." Kathleen's breath caught. "Call on me? Come to dinner, perhaps, or a church social, whatever would be appropriate." He twisted his hat in his hands. "I am not good at pretty speeches. I just know that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I walked in here on Monday. The way you work, the way you think, the way you care about getting things right. I would like to know you better." Every practical bone in Kathleen's body told her to be cautious. She barely knew this man. He was a rancher with bank debts and no guarantee of success. She had responsibilities here, a father who needed her, a business to help run. But she heard herself say, "Yes." Russell's smile was like sunrise. "Yes, yes, you may call on me," Kathleen said. "There is a church social tomorrow evening. You could accompany me to that." "I will be here at 6, he promised. He was there at 5:30, freshly shaved and wearing what was clearly his best shirt. Kathleen had put on her good dress, the blue one with the white collar that her father said brought out her eyes. Thomas watched them leave with an expression of mingled approval and melancholy. His little girl was growing up, growing away, and they both knew it. The social was held in the churchyard, with tables of food contributed by the congregation and lanterns strung between the trees. Kathleen introduced Russell to what felt like half the town, and he was unfailingly polite to everyone. When the fiddlers started playing, he asked her to dance. "I should warn you, I am better with cattle than with dancing," he said as he took her hand. "Then we will keep it simple," Kathleen said. They moved together under the lantern light, and Kathleen felt like she was in a dream. Russell's hand was warm on her waist, his other hand gentle as it held hers. He did not dance with much skill, but he moved with confidence, and that was enough. "Tell me about your family," Kathleen said as they turned. "Where are you from originally?" "Pennsylvania," Russell said. "My father was a blacksmith. I have 2 brothers and a sister. They are all back east still, settled and married. I was the restless one who wanted to see what was west of the mountains. You miss them? Sometimes, he admitted, but I write letters and they write back. And I needed to make my own way, find out who I was apart from being John Reynolds' son. I understand that, Kathleen said. Sometimes I wonder who I would be if I were not the printer's daughter. You would still be someone remarkable, Russell said quietly. They danced 3 more dances and then Russell walked her home through the warm August night. At her door he took her hand. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "I would like that," Kathleen said. "Tomorrow is Sunday. After church, would you come out to the ranch? I want you to see what I am building." Kathleen hesitated. Visiting a man's ranch alone was not proper, but Russell seemed to anticipate her concern. "Your father could come too," he said quickly. "I would like him to see the place. And there is a woman, Maria, who cooks for the hands. It would all be above board." "Then yes," Kathleen said. "We will come." Sunday afternoon, Thomas and Kathleen rode out in the wagon, following Russell's directions. The ranch lay in a valley with good grass and a creek running through it. The house was modest, a sturdy structure of adobe and timber, and the barn and corrals were well maintained. Kathleen could see the care that had gone into the place. Russell met them at the house, and Maria, a comfortable woman of about 50, served them lemonade on the porch. Thomas and Russell talked about ranching and the challenges of building a business in the territory. Kathleen listened and watched. She saw how Russell spoke about his plans with enthusiasm but also with realistic understanding of the risks. He was not a dreamer, but he was also not afraid to hope. After they had talked for an hour, Russell offered to show them around. They walked to the barn where he kept his horses, out to the pasture where the cattle grazed, along the fence line he was extending. Thomas eventually claimed tiredness and went back to sit with Maria, leaving Russell and Kathleen to walk alone. "It is beautiful here," Kathleen said, looking at the mountains in the distance. "It is," Russell agreed. "When I first saw this valley, I knew it was where I wanted to be, where I wanted to build a life." They reached the creek and stood on its bank, watching the water run clear over smooth stones. Russell picked up a flat rock and skipped it across a calm pool. "Kathleen," he said, and the use of her first name sent a thrill through her. "I am going to be honest with you because I think you value honesty." "I do," she said. "I am falling in love with you," Russell said. "I know it has only been a week. I know that sounds crazy. But I am 25 years old, I have known a fair number of women, and I have never felt anything like what I feel when I am with you. Like everything makes more sense. Like the world is brighter and clearer." Kathleen's heart was pounding. "Russell, I barely know you." "Then get to know me," he said. "Give me a chance to court you properly. Let me show you who I am." She looked at him, this man who had walked into her father's shop a week ago and turned her careful, ordered life upside down. The smart thing would be to say no, to protect herself, to stay in the safe, predictable world she had built. Instead, she said, "I am falling in love with you too. And yes, it is crazy, but I want to see where this goes." Russell's smile was brilliant. He took her hand, and they stood by the creek while the afternoon sun painted everything gold. The courtship that followed was both proper and intense. Russell came to town 3 times a week, always bringing some small gift: wildflowers, a book he thought she might like, fresh eggs from Maria's chickens. He attended church every Sunday and sat with Kathleen and her father. He helped out at the newspaper, learning more about the printing process and making himself useful with the heavy work. Kathleen found herself living for his visits. She loved the way he listened when she talked about her work, how he asked intelligent questions and remembered her answers. She loved his stories about ranch life, the challenges and small victories. She loved how he treated her father with respect, but not like he was an obstacle to be overcome. In September, Russell's advertisement finally brought results. 2 experienced ranch hands arrived looking for work, and he hired them both. With his crew complete, the ranch began to thrive. Cattle that had been half wild were rounded up and properly managed. Fences that had fallen into disrepair were rebuilt. The place took on an air of prosperity. In October, Russell asked Thomas for permission to marry Kathleen. They were in the print shop, the 3 of them, working on the week's edition. Russell had become such a regular presence that he knew how to help without being asked. When there was a break in the work, he cleared his throat. "Mr. Turner, I would like to speak with you about something important." Thomas set down the form he was carrying. "I think I know what this is about." "I want to marry your daughter," Russell said directly. "I love her. I will work every day to make her happy and to build a good life for us. I know I am not rich, but the ranch is doing well and I am making payments to the bank on schedule. I can provide for her." Thomas looked at his daughter. "Kathleen, is this what you want?" "It is, Papa," she said softly. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know she runs this place more than I do now. She has a mind for the business, a real talent. I always thought she might take it over someday." "I would never ask her to give it up if she does not want to," Russell said. "We can find a way to make both things work. Can you?" Thomas asked. "A ranch is not something you can manage part-time, and neither is a newspaper." It was the question that had been haunting Kathleen for weeks. She loved the print shop, the smell of ink, the satisfaction of creating something tangible and important. But she also loved Russell, and she wanted the life he was offering. She had been avoiding the conflict, hoping somehow it would resolve itself. "Papa," she said slowly, "what if we hired someone to help you? Someone who could learn the business, take over the typesetting and some of the editing. You could still publish the paper, but you would not be doing all the work yourself." Thomas considered this. "That would cost money." "The paper makes money," Kathleen pointed out. "Not a fortune, but enough. And I would still help when I could. The ranch is only 8 miles away." Russell spoke up. "I would contribute to the wages if needed. I know how much the newspaper means to Kathleen and to this town. I do not want to be the reason it struggles." Thomas looked between them, seeing their determination, their careful planning. Finally, he smiled. "You two really are well matched. Both of you think 3 steps ahead." "Is that a yes?" Russell asked. "That is a yes," Thomas said. "On the condition that we find the right person to help with the paper and that Kathleen does not abandon it completely." "I promise," Kathleen said. And then she was in Russell's arms, and he was holding her like she was precious beyond measure. They were married in November 1878, in the small church in Eager, with what felt like the entire town in attendance. Kathleen wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved, and carried wildflowers that Russell had gathered from the high country. When she walked down the aisle and saw him waiting for her, his eyes bright with emotion, she knew she was making the right choice. The reception was held at the ranch. Maria and the ranch hands had transformed the barn, decorating it with lanterns and autumn leaves. There was dancing and food and toasts with whiskey and lemonade. Thomas gave a speech about how he was not losing a daughter but gaining a son who was foolish enough to think printing was interesting. Everyone laughed, and Russell laughed hardest of all. As the sun set and the party continued around them, Russell pulled Kathleen aside. They walked out to the creek, the same spot where they had stood 3 months earlier when he had told her he was falling in love. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I knew I could be," Kathleen said honestly. Russell took both her hands in his. "I meant what I said that first day. Set your life beside mine with that precision. I want us to build something together, something as carefully crafted as the words you said in type. A marriage where every piece fits right, where we pay attention to the details that matter. That is what I want too, Kathleen said. He kissed her then, long and deep, and when they finally walked back to the barn, hand in hand, Kathleen felt like her life was finally beginning in earnest. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Kathleen had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, so different from the print shop. She woke before dawn to help Maria with breakfast for the hands. She learned to ride a horse properly so she could help move cattle when needed. She discovered that she enjoyed the physical work, the way her muscles grew stronger, the satisfaction of seeing the results of labor in well-fed cattle and tended land. But she also missed the newspaper. She went into town twice a week to help her father, and true to their agreement, they had hired a young man named Peter who was learning the business. Peter was eager and careful, and Thomas said he had real potential. Still, Kathleen felt a pang every time she left the print shop, a sense of something precious slipping away. Russell noticed. He always noticed. In December, when she came home quiet after a day at the paper, he sat beside her on their bed and took her hand. "You miss it," he said. "I do," she admitted. "I know I am here and this is my home now, but part of me is still in that shop, still setting type and checking proofs." "What if we brought some of it here?" Russell asked. Kathleen looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "What if we bought a small press, just big enough to do job printing? Circulars, invitations, that sort of thing. You could work here at the ranch, take commissions from people in town. It would not be the same as running the newspaper, but it would keep you connected to the craft." Tears sprang to Kathleen's eyes. "That would be expensive." "I have some money saved," Russell said. "And you could make it back in work. There are enough people in Eager and the surrounding area who need printing done. We could set up a shop in one of the outbuildings. You would do that for me." "Kathleen, I did not marry you to make you into someone else," Russell said seriously. "I married you because you are a printer's daughter who sets type with precision and care, because you have ink on your fingers and intelligence in your eyes. I want you to have the things that make you who you are." She kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and love into it. 3 weeks later, a small printing press arrived by freight wagon, and Russell and the ranch hands helped her set up a shop in a converted storage building. It was not the newspaper office, but it was hers, and she loved it fiercely. Word spread quickly that Kathleen could do job printing, and soon she had a steady stream of work. She printed wedding invitations for the doctor's daughter, notices for the general store, wanted posters for the sheriff. Each piece she approached with the same precision she had learned at her father's side, and people appreciated the quality of her work. Russell would often come to the print shop in the evening after his work was done. He would sit and watch her work, or help with the simple tasks she taught him. Sometimes they would talk, and sometimes they would just be together in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clink of metal type and the creak of the press. In March of 1879, Kathleen realized she was pregnant. She told Russell on a Sunday afternoon, and he picked her up and spun her around with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction made the answer clear. "Happy, Kathleen, I am over the moon." "When?" "October, I think," she said. He became impossibly attentive after that, though Kathleen remained healthy and strong throughout the pregnancy. She kept working in her print shop through the summer, though Russell made her promise to avoid the heavy lifting. He hired a boy from town to help with the physical parts of the work, and Kathleen focused on the typesetting and design. Thomas came out to visit often, excited about becoming a grandfather. He would sit in the shop and watch Kathleen work, and she knew he was remembering when she was 12 years old and learning the craft for the first time. "You have done well for yourself," he told her one day. "Better than I hoped." "I miss working with you," Kathleen said. "I miss it too," Thomas admitted. "But this is good. You have your own life now, your own family. That is how it should be." In late October, after a labor that lasted through the night, Kathleen gave birth to a son. They named him Thomas Russell Reynolds, honoring both grandfathers. He was healthy and loud and perfect, with his father's green eyes and a shock of dark hair. Russell held his son with such tenderness that Kathleen felt tears on her face. "He is amazing," Russell whispered. "You are amazing." Those early weeks with the baby were exhausting and wonderful. Maria helped, and Russell was an involved father, getting up for nighttime feedings and learning to change diapers with the same determination he brought to ranching. Kathleen marveled at how their family had grown, from just the two of them to this new little person who had changed everything. She went back to her print shop when Thomas was 3 months old, setting him in a cradle nearby while she worked. He was a good baby, content to sleep or watch the play of light through the window while she set type. Sometimes Russell would come in and pick up their son, talking to him about the ranch, about the cattle, about all the things they would do together as Thomas grew. The years that followed were full and good. The ranch prospered, and Russell expanded the operation, buying more land and increasing the herd. Kathleen's print shop became an established business in its own right, and she took pride in the quality of her work. Thomas Turner's newspaper continued to publish every week, with Peter taking on more responsibilities as Thomas aged. In 1881, they had a daughter, whom they named Mary Catherine. She was as different from her brother as could be, quiet where he was loud, serious where he was playful. Kathleen loved watching them grow, seeing their different personalities emerge. Russell was the kind of father she had hoped he would be. Patient and kind, but firm when needed. He taught Thomas to ride when the boy was 4, holding him steady in the saddle and praising each small accomplishment. He carried Mary on his shoulders around the ranch, pointing out birds and plants and teaching her the names of everything. And through it all, he and Kathleen remained deeply connected. They still walked to the creek in the evenings when the children were asleep, talking about their days and their plans. They still worked together sometimes, Russell helping in the print shop or Kathleen riding out to check on the cattle. They had built something solid and true, a marriage that functioned with the precision Russell had spoken of on that first day. In 1884, Thomas Turner fell ill with pneumonia. Kathleen spent 2 weeks at his bedside in town, leaving the children with Russell and Maria. Peter kept the newspaper running, but everyone knew the heart of the operation was fading. Thomas died on a cold February morning with Kathleen holding his hand. The funeral was well attended. Thomas had been a fixture in Eager for 20 years, and the newspaper had been his gift to the community. Kathleen grieved deeply, but she also felt grateful. Grateful that he had lived to see her married and happy, to meet his grandchildren, to know that she was settled and loved. After the funeral, Peter came to her with a proposal. He wanted to buy the newspaper. He had saved money and had a loan arranged with the bank. He would keep the Turner name in the masthead as a tribute, but it would become his responsibility. Kathleen agreed. She knew she could not run both the newspaper and her print shop while raising 2 children. And Peter had earned the right to ownership. He had worked hard, learned well, and proved his dedication. With the sale, Kathleen had unexpected capital. She and Russell discussed what to do with the money and decided to invest it in the ranch. They built a larger house, one with a proper parlor and enough bedrooms for their growing family. They upgraded the barn and added more corrals. They bought breeding stock that would improve their herd. Life continued its steady rhythm. Thomas grew into a responsible boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did. At 10 years old, he could rope and ride and do a day's work alongside the hands. Mary was more bookish, often found reading in the shade or helping her mother in the print shop. She had an eye for design and would arrange the type in creative ways that made even simple notices look elegant. In 1886, Kathleen found herself pregnant again, a surprise at 30 years old. This baby was another son whom they named James. He was a happy, easy child who seemed to find joy in everything. Thomas and Mary doted on their baby brother, and the house was full of laughter. Russell, at 33, had achieved everything he had dreamed of in those early days. A successful ranch, a family, a place in the community. But he never took it for granted. He still worked alongside his hands every day. He still walked with Kathleen to the creek in the evenings. He still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. One evening in 1888, 10 years after they had married, Russell and Kathleen sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set. Thomas was 14 now, working with the cattle. Mary was 7, inside helping Maria with dinner. James was 2, asleep in his crib. The sound of their life surrounded them, comfortable and good. "You remember what you said to me the day we met?" Kathleen asked. "I said a lot of things," Russell replied with a smile, "most of them embarrassingly forward." "You said to set my life beside yours with precision," Kathleen reminded him, "like I was setting type." "I remember," Russell said. "I could not believe I said something so presumptuous to a woman I had just met, but it felt true then and it feels true now." "We did it," Kathleen said. "We built something precise and careful and good." Russell took her hand. "We did, and it is even better than I imagined it could be." They sat in the gathering darkness, hands linked, watching stars appear one by one in the Arizona sky. Inside, they heard Mary laugh at something Maria said. From the barn came the sound of Thomas talking to the horses. The ranch spread around them, solid and real, the fruit of their combined labor and love. The years continued to pass in the steady rhythm they had established. Thomas grew into a young man of strength and character, so much like his father that it sometimes took Kathleen's breath away. He was 18 in 1895 and already talking about expanding the ranch, about new breeds of cattle and modern ranching methods. Russell listened to his son's ideas with respect, and sometimes they implemented them, finding that the young man's instincts were often sound. Mary was 14, and while she helped around the ranch when needed, her true passion was printing. She spent hours in her mother's shop, learning the craft with the same dedication Kathleen had shown at her age. She talked about going to San Francisco someday to study advanced printing techniques, and Kathleen encouraged her dreams while hoping she would not go too far from home. James was 9, still finding his place in the family. He was the charmer, the one who could talk his way out of trouble and make everyone smile. He loved the ranch animals but showed no particular ambition toward ranching or printing. Kathleen suspected he would find his own unique path. The ranch had grown substantially over the years. Russell employed 8 full-time hands now, and during busy seasons like roundup and calving, they hired more. They ran 500 head of cattle, and the operation was profitable enough that they had paid off the bank loan years ago. The land was fully theirs, and Russell took pride in every acre. Kathleen's print shop had also grown. She now employed 2 assistants and took on larger projects. She had printed books of poetry for a local writer, elaborate invitations for territorial politicians, even a small catalog for a merchant in a neighboring town. Her work had a reputation for quality, and people traveled from considerable distances to commission pieces from her. In the summer of 1897, Russell turned 44 and Kathleen 41. They celebrated with a party at the ranch, inviting friends from all over the territory. As Kathleen looked around at the gathering, at the life they had built together, she felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what she had wanted all those years ago when she had said yes to Russell's courtship. This fullness, this richness, this sense of purpose and connection. That evening, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Russell and Kathleen walked their familiar path to the creek. It was a warm night, and the water gurgled pleasantly over the stones. They sat on the bank, shoulders touching, comfortable in the silence between them. "Kathleen," Russell said eventually, "I want you to know something." "What is that?" "Every day I wake up grateful," he said. "Grateful that I walked into that print shop 19 years ago. Grateful that you gave me a chance. Grateful for every moment since." "I am grateful too," Kathleen said softly, "for all of it, the good days and the hard ones. The times when everything worked perfectly and the times when we had to figure things out as we went. All of it has been worth it because I have been living it with you." Russell turned to face her. Even in the dim starlight, she could see the love in his eyes, undiminished by time. "Set your life beside mine with that precision," he repeated, echoing his words from so long ago. "You did, Kathleen. You said it exactly right. Every piece in its place, every word spelled correctly, every line straight and true. We did it together," she said. "That is the secret, I think. Not one person setting everything perfectly, but two people working together to create something neither could have made alone." They kissed then, long and sweet, like newlyweds despite nearly 20 years of marriage. The creek ran beside them, constant and eternal, witness to their love as it had been from the beginning. In 1899, Thomas announced his engagement to a young woman from a neighboring ranch, a capable rider and skilled homemaker named Sarah. The wedding was set for the spring, and the whole family threw themselves into the preparations. Mary designed and printed the most beautiful invitations Kathleen had ever seen, with elaborate borders and perfectly balanced text. James, now 13, helped his father and brother build an addition onto the ranch house where Thomas and Sarah would live after the marriage. The wedding was a joyous occasion, and Kathleen felt the bittersweet emotion of watching her firstborn begin his own life. But she was pleased with his choice. Sarah was kind and hardworking, and she looked at Thomas the way Kathleen still looked at Russell, with love and respect and genuine partnership. By 1900, as the new century dawned, the Reynolds Ranch was a thriving operation spanning thousands of acres. Thomas and Sarah had presented Kathleen and Russell with a granddaughter, named Kathleen Rose in honor of her grandmother. Mary was 19 and had indeed gone to San Francisco to study printing, though she wrote home faithfully every week and promised to return to Eager eventually. James, at 14, had discovered a talent for horses and was training to become a farrier, planning to serve the ranches throughout the territory. Russell was 47 now, his hair graying at the temples but his body still strong from daily ranch work. Kathleen was 44, and while she had a few more lines on her face, her hands were still steady and sure when she set type. They had lived through droughts and good years, through territorial politics and Apache troubles, through the challenges of raising children and running businesses. They had survived and thrived. One evening in late 1901, Russell came into Kathleen's print shop where she was working on a commission. He watched her for a moment, admiring the concentration on her face as she placed each tiny letter in the composing stick. "You are staring," she said without looking up. "I like watching you work," Russell replied. "I always have." Kathleen finished the line she was setting and looked up at him. "What brings you by? I thought you were checking the south fence today." "I was. It is done," Russell said. He came closer, running a finger along the edge of the composing table. "I was thinking today about that first day I came into your father's shop, how young we both were, how little we knew about what we were starting." "Are you feeling nostalgic in your old age?" Kathleen teased. "Maybe," Russell admitted. "But mostly I was thinking about how glad I am that I needed to place that advertisement, that I walked through that particular door on that particular day. It changed my whole life." "It changed mine too," Kathleen said, "in the best possible ways." Russell reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. "I brought you something. It is not much, but I saw it and thought of you." He placed it in her palm. It was a piece of metal type, larger than the ones she used for printing. Custom made. It was the letter K, beautifully crafted with elaborate serifs and perfect proportions. "Russell," she breathed, "this is beautiful. Where did you get it?" "I had it made by a metalworker in Santa Fe," he said. "I sent him the specifications months ago. It is too large to use in your press, but I thought maybe you could keep it, as a reminder of where we started." Kathleen felt tears prick her eyes. After 23 years of marriage, he could still surprise her with his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. I will treasure this." "Like I treasure you," Russell said simply. They stood together in the print shop, surrounded by the tools of her trade, in the life they had built with such care. And Kathleen thought about precision again, about how every small choice and moment had led to this. The choice to let a cowboy watch them print newspapers. The choice to dance with him under lanterns. The choice to say yes when he asked to court her. The choice to set her life beside his, piece by piece, letter by letter, building something that would last. The years continued their steady march. In 1903, Mary returned from San Francisco with advanced skills and new ideas. She opened her own print shop in town, specializing in fine art printing and books. Kathleen was proud beyond measure, seeing her daughter carry on the family trade with such excellence. Mother and daughter often collaborated on large projects, combining their skills and knowledge. James finished his apprenticeship and became the most sought-after farrier in the territory. He married a quiet, intelligent woman named Elizabeth who shared his love of horses. They built a small house on the edge of the Reynolds ranch, close enough to family but with their own space. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children in quick succession. Kathleen rose, followed by twin boys named Russell and Thomas Jr. The main ranch house was full of noise and life, with 3 generations under one roof. Russell Sr. and Kathleen had built a small private cottage for themselves on the property, a place where they could retreat when the bustle became too much, but they spent most of their time with their extended family. In 1905, Russell turned 52 and Kathleen 49. They were grandparents to 5 children now, and Thomas had taken over most of the day-to-day management of the ranch. Russell still worked when he wanted to, but he had earned the right to slow down, to spend more time with Kathleen, to enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. One spring morning, Kathleen woke to find Russell already awake, watching her in the soft dawn light coming through the window of their cottage. "Good morning," she murmured. "How long have you been awake?" "A while," he admitted. "I was just thinking." "About what?" "About precision," Russell said. "About that thing I said to you the day we met. Set your life beside mine with that precision." Kathleen propped herself up on one elbow. "You think about that often, don't you?" "I do," Russell said, "because I want to be sure I have lived up to it. That I have treated our life together with the care it deserves. That I have not become careless or taken you for granted." Kathleen reached out and touched his face, feeling the familiar planes and angles, the silver stubble that had once been brown. "Russell Reynolds, you have never taken me for granted, not for one single day in 27 years. Sometimes I worry," he confessed, "that I have not been enough, That you gave up too much when you married me. I gave up nothing that mattered, Kathleen said firmly. I gained everything that does. A partner, a family, a life full of purpose and love. What more could anyone want? Are you happy? Russell asked, the same question he had asked on their wedding day. Happier than I ever imagined possible, Kathleen said. Are you? More than I have words for, Russell replied. They lay together in the quiet morning, listening to the sounds of the ranch waking up outside. The rooster crowing, the horses nickering for their breakfast, the voices of their grandchildren playing in the yard. It was the sound of everything they had built together, still thriving, still growing. Later that day, Kathleen was in her print shop when Mary came by with a proposition. A publisher in Phoenix wanted to contract with them to produce a series of illustrated books showcasing the history and culture of the Arizona Territory. It would be their largest project ever, requiring both their workshops working in tandem for months. What do you think? Mary asked. It would be a lot of work, but it would establish us as the premier print operation in the territory. Kathleen considered. At 49, did she want to take on such an ambitious project? But as she thought about it, she felt the old excitement rising. The challenge of complex typography, of coordinating text and images, of producing something beautiful and lasting. Let us do it, she said. They spent the rest of the year on the books, and it was some of the most satisfying work Kathleen had ever done. She and Mary worked together seamlessly, their skills complementing each other perfectly. Russell would sometimes stop by and watch them work, still fascinated by the process even after all these years. The books were published in the spring of 1906 to tremendous acclaim. People throughout the territory praised the quality of the printing, the clarity of the text, the beauty of the designs. Kathleen and Mary became known not just locally but throughout the Southwest as master printers. That summer, the family gathered to celebrate multiple occasions. Russell's 53rd birthday, Kathleen and Russell's 28th wedding anniversary, and the success of the book project. The party was held at the ranch, with family and friends from all over attending. There was music and dancing, good food and better company. As the evening drew to a close, Russell stood and called for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, and he began to speak. 28 years ago, I walked into a print shop in this town because I needed to place an advertisement for ranch hands. I met a woman who was setting type with such care and precision that it took my breath away. I said something incredibly forward to her, something about setting her life beside mine with that same precision. Somehow, miraculously, she did not throw me out. She gave me a chance. People laughed softly. Kathleen felt her cheeks warm even after all these years. Russell continued. What I have learned in the years since is that building a life with that kind of precision is not about perfection. It is about attention, about showing up every day and putting in the work. About caring for the details, yes, but also about being willing to adjust when things do not go according to plan. About trusting your partner to hold up their end while you hold up yours. He looked directly at Kathleen. You have been my partner in every sense of the word. In the ranch, in raising our children, in building something that will outlast us both. I am the luckiest man alive because you chose to set your life beside mine. Kathleen stood and went to him, and they embraced while their family and friends applauded. She could feel the solidity of him, the strength that had carried them through nearly 3 decades of life together. And she knew that whatever years remained to them, they would face them the same way they had faced everything else, together with care, with attention to what mattered. The years rolled on, bringing the inevitable changes that time delivers. In 1910, Kathleen turned 54 and Russell 57. They were grandparents to 8 now, with Thomas and Sarah's family continuing to grow. The ranch was more successful than ever, with Thomas proving to be an even more innovative manager than his father had been. Kathleen still worked in her print shop several days a week, though she had hired more assistants to handle the physical labor. Her hands, after 42 years of setting type, were developing arthritis, but she worked through the pain because she could not imagine giving up the work she loved. Russell had fully retired from ranching, content to advise when asked, but mostly to spend his time with Kathleen. They took long walks together, read books in the evenings, played with their grandchildren. They had earned their rest, though neither of them was the type to be truly idle. In 1912, the territory of Arizona became a state. It was a moment of historic significance, and Kathleen and Russell attended the celebrations in Phoenix. As they stood in the crowd watching the ceremonies, Kathleen thought about how much had changed since they had first met in 1878. Eager had grown from a small frontier town to a proper community. The wild dangers of the early territorial days had given way to law and order. Their children were grown, their grandchildren were thriving, and they had lived to see Arizona take its place among the states. "We have seen a lot of history," Russell said, as if reading her thoughts. "We have," Kathleen agreed, "and we made some of our own." On their 35th wedding anniversary in 1913, their entire family gathered at the ranch. Thomas and Sarah with their 5 children, all growing up strong and capable. Mary, still unmarried and devoted to her printing business, but happy in her choices. James and Elizabeth with their 3 young children. 23 people in total, all connected by the choice Russell and Kathleen had made to build a life together. After dinner, Russell and Kathleen walked once more to their creek. It had been their special place for 35 years, and the path was worn smooth by their footsteps. They sat on the bank, as they had so many times before. "You remember the first time we stood here?" Russell asked. "Of course," Kathleen said. "You told me you were falling in love with me after knowing me for a week. I thought you were crazy." "I was crazy," Russell admitted. "Crazy in love. Are you still?" Kathleen asked teasingly. "More than ever," Russell said seriously. "Love when you are young is passionate and exciting. But love after 35 years, after you have raised children and weathered storms and built something lasting, that is deeper than passion. It is bedrock. It is knowing someone completely and loving them anyway. Because of who they are, not in spite of it." Kathleen leaned against him. "I never imagined when you walked into my father's shop that this was where we would end up, with children and grandchildren, with businesses we built, with a life so full and good. Did you ever regret it?" Russell asked quietly. "Marrying me, leaving the newspaper, all of it?" "Never," Kathleen said firmly. "Not once, not for a moment. Did you?" "Never," Russell echoed. They sat together as the stars came out, as they had done hundreds of times over the decades. And Kathleen thought about precision again, about how Russell had been right all those years ago. The key to a good life was treating the important things with care. Not coldness, not perfection, but genuine attention and respect. They had done that, both of them, every day for 35 years. And the result was this: a love that had lasted, deepened, become stronger with time. The years continued, slower now but still sweet. In 1915, Russell began having trouble with his heart. The doctor said it was from a lifetime of hard work, that his body was simply wearing out. Russell took the news calmly, saying he had lived 62 good years and had no complaints. Kathleen was terrified. The thought of losing him, of facing the world without her partner, was unbearable, but she did not let him see her fear. Instead, she made sure he followed the doctor's orders, that he rested when he needed to, that he took things easy. They spent even more time together, knowing their remaining years might be limited. They talked about their lives, about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and the print shop and all the things they had built. They told each other stories from their decades together, laughing at remembered mishaps and marveling at how much they had accomplished. In the spring of 1917, Mary surprised everyone by announcing her engagement to a widower who was a professor of literature at the Territorial University. The wedding was set for June, and the whole family rejoiced that Mary had found love, even if it came later than expected. Russell insisted on walking Mary down the aisle, though the exertion tired him, but his face glowed with pride as he placed his daughter's hand in her new husband's. Kathleen watched from the front row, tears streaming down her face, grateful that Russell had lived to see this moment. That evening, exhausted but happy, Russell and Kathleen sat in their cottage. Russell was in his chair, his breathing labored, but his eyes were bright. "All 3 of our children married," he said. "All of them happy. That is more than most parents can hope for." "It is," Kathleen agreed. "We have been very blessed. Because of you," Russell said, "because you took the time to raise them right, to teach them about care and precision and doing things well." "We did it together," Kathleen reminded him. "We did everything together," Russell said. "That has been the best part." In 1918, as the Great War raged in Europe, the Reynolds family remained untouched by the conflict, too old or too young to serve. They counted themselves fortunate and did what they could to support the war effort from home. Russell's health continued to decline, but he remained in good spirits. He spent his days in the cottage or on the porch, watching the ranch activities, playing with his grandchildren when they visited. Kathleen was always nearby, setting up her smallest portable typecase so she could work while keeping him company. On a warm afternoon in August 1918, with Kathleen working on an invitation at the table and Russell dozing in his chair, he woke suddenly and spoke. "Kathleen." She set down her composing stick immediately. "Yes, my love. I want you to know something," Russell said. His voice was weak, but his words were clear. "Every single day with you has been a gift. Every moment from that first day in the print shop until now. If I had it to do over, I would not change a thing." "Russell," Kathleen said, moving to kneel beside his chair, "do not talk like that." "I am 65 years old," Russell said gently. "I have lived a full life, a good life. I am not afraid." "I am afraid," Kathleen admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know how to be without you." "You will be fine," Russell said. "You are the strongest person I know. And you will not be alone. You have our children, our grandchildren, your work. You have everything we built together." "But I will not have you," Kathleen sobbed. Russell reached out and wiped her tears with his thumb, a gesture he had made 1,000 times over 40 years. "You will always have me, in our children's faces, in the ranch we built, in every piece of type you set. I am in all of it. We are in all of it." He lived for 2 more months, growing gradually weaker. The whole family gathered at the ranch, knowing the end was near. Russell spent time with each of his children, with his grandchildren, sharing wisdom and memories. But most of his time was spent with Kathleen, sitting quietly together, holding hands, being together in the way they had always been. On October 15, 1918, with Kathleen beside him and his children nearby, Russell Reynolds died peacefully in his sleep. He was 65 years old and had been married to Kathleen for 40 years. The funeral was enormous, attended by people from all over Arizona. Russell had been respected as a rancher, as a businessman, as a community leader. But the eulogy that mattered most was the one Thomas gave, talking about his father as a husband, a father, a man who had lived his values every day. "My father once said something to my mother the day they met," Thomas said. He told her to set her life beside his with precision, like she was setting type, and that is exactly what they did. They built a marriage piece by piece, carefully and deliberately, with attention to the details that mattered. And the result was 40 years of true partnership, of genuine love. That is the legacy he leaves us. Not just the ranch, not just the property, but the example of how to love well and build something that lasts. In the weeks after Russell's death, Kathleen moved through her grief like she moved through everything, with careful attention, one step at a time. Her children wanted her to move into the main house, but she refused. The cottage was where she had lived with Russell, where their life together was most present. She would not leave it. She returned to her print shop, finding comfort in the familiar work. Setting type, inking the press, creating something tangible from blank paper and metal letters. It soothed her in a way nothing else could. One day, about a month after Russell's death, she found the metal letter he had given her years ago. She had kept it on a shelf in the shop, a reminder of his thoughtfulness. She held it now, feeling its weight, its perfect construction, and she remembered his words, "Set your life beside mine with that precision." They had done it. For 40 years, they had built something precise and careful and true. And even though he was gone, the structure they had created remained. The ranch thrived under Thomas's management. Mary's print shop was one of the finest in the state. James had built a successful business. The grandchildren were growing up strong and capable. Everything they had worked for continued. Kathleen lived for another 12 years after Russell's death. She remained active in her print shop until she was 70, finally retiring when her arthritis made it impossible to set type any longer. But she stayed involved, advising Mary on complex projects, teaching her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the craft she loved. She never remarried. When people asked why, she said simply that she had been married to the love of her life for 40 years. How could anyone else compare? She spent her final years surrounded by family. Thomas and Sarah continued to live on the ranch, and the place was always full of children and grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. Kathleen would sit on the porch and watch them play, and she would remember the day Russell had first brought her here, when it was just a modest house and a dream. On a spring morning in 1930, Kathleen Turner Reynolds died peacefully in her sleep in the cottage she had shared with Russell. She was 73 years old. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her in her final days, and she spent her last conscious hours telling them stories about Russell, about their life together, about the importance of building something with care and precision. At her funeral, Mary read a passage her mother had written years before, a reflection on marriage and partnership. The key to a lasting love is not passion, though passion has its place. It is not even compatibility, though that helps. It is attention. It is caring enough to notice the small things, to make adjustments when needed, to put in the work day after day even when it is not exciting. It is treating your life together like a craftsman treats their work, with respect, with care, with the understanding that the details matter. My husband understood this, and he taught me to understand it too. Set your life beside mine with that precision, he said. And we did, and it was the best decision either of us ever made. Kathleen was buried beside Russell on a hillside overlooking the ranch. The whole community attended, paying respects to a woman who had been a businesswoman, a mother, a grandmother, a skilled printer, and above all, a partner to the man she loved. The Reynolds Ranch continued for generations, passed down through Thomas and his children. Mary's print shop remained in operation, eventually taken over by one of her nieces. James's farrier business was carried on by his son. The family remained close, bound together by the example Russell and Kathleen had set. and in the print shop that eventually became a museum showcasing Arizona's printing history, there was a special display. It showed a composing stick with type carefully arranged, a Washington hand press from 1865, and a single large metal letter K. The placard beside it told the story of Russell Reynolds and Kathleen Turner, and how a cowboy had walked into a print shop in 1878 and said something both presumptuous and profound. "Set your life beside mine with that precision." Visitors would read the story and look at the artifacts, and they would understand that they were seeing more than just printing equipment. They were seeing the tools of a love story, of a partnership that had lasted 40 years and created ripples that extended for generations. They were seeing proof that when two people commit to building something together with care and attention and genuine respect, they create something that transcends their individual lives. The creek still ran through the valley, clear and constant. The ranch still sprawled across thousands of acres, green and productive. And in the hearts of everyone who descended from Russell and Kathleen Reynolds, there remained the understanding that love, when built with precision and care, could truly last forever.